A lot of athletes wonder what the principles of success are and are trying to get to the next level, but they're unsure of how to get there or what's really standing in their way. And in this episode of the podcast, I'm going to run you through exactly what the principles of success are and how you're going to make it to the next level. I've talked about this once before on the first pillar of either mental toughness or having success in the game of baseball really comes from self-confidence and almost a little bit of delusion. And I want to tell you a story of kind of how I've understood how this process works and how I used it for myself. So in 2019, I'm at a junior college. Probably one of the worst JUCOs in the entire country, if I'm being honest with you. It was just really close to my house, and it really made sense for me to play there. So I go there. We don't practice because our head coach was a police officer. So, kudos to him, for doing that and also, coaching baseball players. But for us as athletes, we didn't practice, right? So everything was on your own, all of your development. And this is when I really first understood that, nobody's coming to save you in the game of baseball. Like, everything is up to you. So during this time, I really started to understand that I needed to have a belief in myself before things happened. You hear it all the time, like you need to see the vision before it happens, but I'd never done that before. So this was the first time I implemented that. The first thing I did was I created a vision board of what I wanted the next couple of years of my life to look like, specifically in baseball. At the time, to put it into context, I'm at a junior college that's not very good. I don't throw very hard at the time. I think I topped out at like maybe 87, 88, nothing crazy. And honestly, I just wasn't very committed to my process. I didn't even have one. I was just a guy who was kind of talented in high school and then went to a junior college and kind of was hoping for the best outcome. So I finally put it on a vision board. I finally put everything down and really had a thought process of how am I going to achieve my goals that I had set out. In this vision board, I wanted to throw 96 miles an hour, I wanted to play in the Power 4, and I wanted to be one of the best relievers in the entire country. On paper, of where I was at the time, that would have sounded absolutely ridiculous, and I pinned it on my door in my bedroom, and people would have walked by that if someone on the street or one of my teammates probably would have laughed at me. Right? Like, dude, you throw 88, you're at a JUCO that barely practices, and you have zero Division I interest ever since high school, and right, this is two years later. So how would I possibly expect to throw 96 and play at the highest level in college baseball and not even play at the highest level, but be dominant at that level? People would have laughed at me. But I had this real belief that I could make it happen. And here's the thing. You can have belief, but if you don't have the action behind it, it's like nothing, right? The example I like to use, I don't know if they still do this, but I know back in the day, like the US dollar used to be backed by gold in the US Treasury or wherever it was. The dollar is your belief in yourself. The gold is the hard work. So if your dollar is not backed up by the gold, there's nothing really there. There's a disconnect. So you need both. But if you don't have one, you're not going to have the other, and you're not going to have the results you want. So as I said, I created this vision board that was absolutely outrageous. And then that year, I really put in a tremendous amount of work, really, to be honest with you, for the first time. I had never really tried my hardest in the game of baseball and tried to figure out how am I going to get to these dreams that I've set out for myself. Instead of just saying, like, I want to wear this uniform across my chest, how am I actually going to do it? And have actual actions behind my words instead of just telling people, I'm going to be really good one day. It just, for the first time, I really put in an actual plan of attack. So that was the first time I really did that. And at the end of that year, I transferred to Central Connecticut. I finally get a real Division I offer and I get the opportunity to play. Again, I'm not where I want to be yet. I'm not at a Power 4 school. I'm not throwing 96. I'm not one of the best relievers in the country. But I did take a step forward, right? So the main thing too is not thinking that these goals you set out for yourself are going to happen like that. They're going to take time, and they're not going to happen on your timeline, is the biggest thing I can get across. Flash forward again another year. I'm at Central Connecticut. We play against the University of Pitt. We end up losing that game, I think, by a run, but it was a really competitive game. I pitched in that game. I went 2 innings, scoreless. I think I had like 3 strikeouts. Like, I pitched really well. Then there was a pitcher at the University of Pitt who gave up 4 runs against us, went 2 innings. I was throwing harder than he was. I think he was probably throwing 87. At the time, I had increased my velocity into kind of the low 90s. And at the end of that game, I'm walking back to the bus. Pitt had another game after us. It was kind of like a round robin sort of showcase kind of style to start off the college season. I don't know how else to describe it. But there's a foul line between the two of us as we're walking back to the buses. And what I realized is the foul line didn't represent just, the difference between fair and foul, but it was also the separator between two athletes at that time, right? The perception is if both of us walked down the street and I wore Central Connecticut and he wore Pitt, the perception is he's better than me, right? He's in the Power Four, I'm not. But in reality, I was a much better pitcher than he was. So that foul line really symbolized to me that there was this disconnect between where I wanted to be, right, on the other side of the foul line and where I was. And that was really when I took the first step in visualizing really how I was going to be on the other side of that foul line, whether that was in a professional uniform or I was going to transfer. But that was when it hit me was, I'm better than this guy, but nobody is going to believe that because of what we wear across our chest. And not that you should really always think about what other people think, but it was a little bit of fuel to the fire for me because I was a better pitcher than he was. But as I said, we sit down in a restaurant, the two of us, and we're both wearing our school logos. They know what school that is. They're probably going to ask if I played D3 baseball. Just the reality of it. So at the end of that, that series, COVID happens, right? The world shuts down. I go to back to Jersey, where my parents had a house at the time. There was a 2-mile loop around my block that you could run in. This was the first time I really started to understand really visualization and having that belief before it happened, right? I had the vision board and I looked at it every day and I believed that I could make it happen, but I never really saw myself doing it yet. So when I created that vision board, that was a good first step. Now the next thing was when I was running these 2 miles every day because I wanted to just get in better shape and really prepare myself for the season. Every time I was running, I was always envisioning running out of a bullpen, whether it was the big leagues, a new uniform at a new school. And I can't tell you why this was my thought. It's just what I always thought. I was always thinking of as I was running out of the bullpen, a head coach being mic'd up and talking about me and kind of saying things like, he's probably the hardest worker we have. He's one of the best pitchers we got and all this stuff. And obviously at the time, right, I'm at Central Connecticut. We didn't even have in-game interviews because we were a small school and there was no reality of that happening. Flash forward a year later, I commit to the University of Oregon. We're playing Oregon State at the time, number 2 team in the country on a Saturday night. I come out of the bullpen. As I'm running to the field, our head coach gets the mic on and they start asking him some questions while I'm warming up about me. They start asking like, Dylan Sabia, a guy who transferred from Central Connecticut, what do you think of him? And basically he said that, I was a very heavily sought after pitcher and they were happy to have me. I'm a part of the team, that I was a hardworking guy, from New York, something along those lines, right? And that was the first time I really sat back and was like, wow, like I saw that 2 years before it happened. Like I vividly saw that moment. Now, did I vividly think it was Oregon? No, but I did already see that as a kid who was nowhere close to that, but I had already seen it happen. So when it did, it was twofold. It was one, kind of told you, I knew that was going to happen, right? But also holy crap. I saw that before it even happened. That's crazy. So that's the first pillar in the principles to success is you need to see it before it happens and be as wild as you can possibly be with it. The second thing that I always talk about is you need an alter ego. Now, does this need to be an actual person? Absolutely not. You don't need to be like Russell Wilson and have Mr. Unlimited that he talks about. But you do need somebody that once you put on that uniform, you're no longer yourself in a sense, right? You're somebody different now. You're the athlete, right? You're the warrior in battle. And it's not that you need this crazy sort of persona. It's the fact that if you keep taking the game of baseball home with you, it will eat you alive. Because let's be honest, not all of us, of any baseball player, is ever going to have a great night on the baseball field every single night they go out, right? Any baseball player you want to name, they're going to have bad outings, whether it's a hitter, pitcher, whatever. So if you start bringing outings home with you, it's going to really consume you, and then you get results driven. Then every time you step on the field or every time you think about yourself in that manner, it's all about results. It has nothing to do with your process or who you are as a human being. So you need that alter ego that when you put on the uniform, you're now the baseball player, you're somebody else, and it can free you up a little bit mentally that, you do have this kind of persona in a sense. The other thing too, when you do have that alter ego and when you are at the field, you need to have positive self-talk. Now that looks different for everybody. George Kittle, when he was injured, would do something where he would say, Inhale health, exhale pain, right? And that was positive self-talk for him. He was banged up in the playoffs and wanted to, you know, almost trick his mind in a sense that he was healthy. Then there are some other guys who, there was one video I saw of Adrian Peterson kind of catching some passes, running some sequences before his, I think also a playoff game. And he's telling himself like he's the greatest. Like, I know I'm the greatest, always been the greatest. I'm gonna keep being the greatest. I'm just gonna be me. Like all these stuff. Because if you ever have a negative thought come into your brain and you don't stop it in its tracks, it's gonna consume you. Now, are we gonna have negative thoughts in the game? 100%. That's called being a human being. I would be lying to you if I would say that, you know, you're never gonna have a negative thought in the game of baseball. That's just not the truth. But you need to be able to have positive thoughts throughout that to combat the negative thoughts and eventually have less and less of them. The biggest thing I want to get across when it comes to all of this principles of success is it really is rooted in that self-belief and believing that you are the greatest, you are the best to ever do it. You know, as I said, in 2019, when I was a kid at a JUCO, I was carrying myself as somebody who was really talented in the game of baseball, and at the time I wasn't. Right? Now that's not saying that I was going up to people saying I'm better than you and I'm the greatest, because nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants that guy in their locker room. But I was telling myself that, and I was doing things that I thought somebody who was the best at their sport would do. Right? So the artist Russ, you can hate him or love him, but he had an album that he released in 2015 called 2020. And what he did in that album was he wrote songs about things that he thought would happen in 2020. He wrote about, you know, being a millionaire, driving a nice car, you know, living in Bora Bora and all these places. And a lot of the things he wrote about come 2020 came true. So again, the visualization and the alter ego and the self-belief are so crucial to having success in this game. And then the third part, to me the most important, is you're gonna have things that go wrong. Like as I said, I created that vision board and a year later, I wasn't there yet. But that didn't mean that I just gave up on it entirely and was like, oh, it's never gonna happen, and I move on. I still truly believe that it could happen. It just didn't happen on the timeline I expected. And this brings us to something I've talked about in the past called the boulder theory. Right? So the boulder theory is you're pushing a boulder up a hill, and the boulder itself is so big in your vision that you can't see the top of the hill. Right? You can see left and right, but you have no idea how much further you have to push this boulder to get it to the top and eventually have it topple down. What most people do is they don't love that process of pushing the boulder, which makes sense. Most people don't. But that process of pushing the boulder is, you know, arm care, hard work, anything that goes into being a baseball player and the process of being a baseball player. What happens with most people is they get really fed up because they haven't gotten the results yet. They've been pushing this boulder for what they perceive as a very long time, right? 1 year, 2 years, 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, right? It's a really long time to push this boulder. And they end up stepping out of the way and giving up and watching the boulder roll down the hill. And now the boulder's not in front of them anymore, and they actually look up and they were about 5 feet away from actually getting to the top of the hill. Like they were so close, but there were things getting in their way throughout that process, right? So that could be, you know, people telling you never make it, you know, you end up getting injured, your velocity goes down, you have a couple bad outings. Most people just step out of the way of the boulder, let it roll back to the bottom of the hill, and now you're back at square zero, and you look up and, damn, dude, you have 5 feet left, right? So that's another part of this process is, you know, obviously self-belief and the alter ego, but when it comes to the boulder theory is don't step out of the way. Just keep pushing it up the hill, because eventually you're gonna reach the top and eventually it's gonna roll over. And it might not be the goal that you think it is when you reach that top of the mountaintop. I envisioned some other things on my vision board that didn't necessarily come true, but I either came really damn close or I actually got put in a different direction that was way better than what I could have imagined, especially like what I do now with training athletes. I never would have expected to be in this career path, and to be completely honest with you, I love it. I love training athletes. I love helping guys achieve their dreams and doing something similar to what I did. But I never had that on my vision board. I never wrote down on the side like train athletes remotely and write programs. I never had that on my vision board. But now I get to speak with athletes about their dreams all over the world, and it fires me up every day. You know, that's something I didn't have on there. But doing what I did in the game of baseball and continuously pushing that boulder over the hill, when it eventually reached the mountaintop and flipped over, I was a Division I pitcher. I threw 96 miles an hour, and now I train athletes all over the world. So don't expect these things to happen on your timeline. And if something on your vision board doesn't come true, but another path, right? One door closes, another one opens. And sometimes the door that opens is much better than what you could have possibly imagined. Some of the things on my vision board, if they came true, I don't know if I'm the same person sitting in front of you. And maybe, not that I'm a worse person, but maybe I'm just not as well-rounded as I feel like I am when it comes to what I do for a living and some of the experiences that I've had, right? One of the things obviously I didn't expect to happen is the year that I was projected to be a draft pick and I transferred to the University of Oregon and I'm on top of the world, I get hurt, right? I have a nerve injury that I still don't know to this day really how it happened, and all the doctors that I went to really couldn't explain it, and they just used that, I probably overused my body, which I definitely did, but there was nothing that really pointed to why this happened, right? And at the time, it was like the worst thing that could possibly happen, right? Like, I was having draft meetings, I was projected, anywhere from rounds like 10 to 15. If I just had a decent year in the Pac-12, probably might have even gone higher if I had a very similar year to the year I had before, right? I had a 2.8 ERA the year before. If I did that in the Pac-12, arguably I could be maybe an 8th rounder, 7th rounder, somewhere in there, right? We really don't know. But I get hurt and it derails everything, and obviously my velocity goes down, I'm in pain consistently, and I just pitch through this injury. But if that doesn't happen, I don't have the same path in life, right? I don't have going back to Oregon to be a graduate assistant and learning under Jake Angier and understanding some of the college pitching side of things and really relating to some of these players and fully developing my mindset as a coach. That never happens, right? I then don't start training athletes online because, to be completely honest with you, I'm probably playing professional baseball. Maybe I end up being a big leaguer like I always dreamed of. But a lot of things in my life don't turn out the same. So when things on your vision board don't go exactly the way you envisioned them to go, that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing, right? You're gonna achieve a lot of things that you put on that vision board if you really believe you can do so. I truly believe that. But when things don't go your way and some things kind of go awry, don't look at them as a negative. As I said earlier, right? Positive self-talk. Nothing in life happens to you. You're always in control of things that happen, whether you believe that right now or not. If you believe that things in life happen to you, right, where everything's against you and it's always like you versus the world, it's going to be a really difficult experience for you, and especially in the game of baseball. Right? A guy makes an error and you're like, why does this always happen to me? That's not how you have to look at it, right? Maybe that guy makes an error because now that guy gets on first base and this guy was going to hit a ball up the middle and actually derail the whole inning, but now he hits the ball up the middle, you're in double play depth, you get out of the inning, right? So everything can be looked at as a positive. And if you think that life is always happening to you, it's gonna be a very difficult experience for you, just in the game of baseball in general. But those are really the 3 principles to success. And as I said, these are the 3 things you can take away and how to use them. As I said at the end of this video, the end of this episode of the podcast, you're gonna get the secret sauce on how to do this. So the first thing is you're gonna create a vision board once you're done viewing this podcast. One that's a short term and one that's a long term, right? So that's step 1. Step 2 is you need to truly believe in your process to get there and have a process to get there, because it's great to make the vision board, but if you don't have a process to get you to that level, again, it's having the dollar without the gold backing. And then the third thing is finding that alter ego when you show up to the field. Again, it doesn't have to be a physical person, but when you put on that jersey, take a second and really immerse yourself into that. You're the baseball player now. I really hope those 3 things helped you. And this is episode 1 of the Stud Muffin podcast. Thank you for tuning in.